Listening to Legal Issues of the Day. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to our show each and every week. Thank you for being a responsible citizen. For all the folks who voted in the last election, thank you very much. And all those folks who's showing up for jury duty each time you get a subpoena, thank you. Our system of justice and accountability is counting on you. Today we have our superstar panel, Attorney Milton Grimes and Attorney Vanita Banks. And we have a potpourri of topics to discuss. There are so many interesting things that are going on in our legal community. But the bombshell that hit this week were presidential pardons. The typical president has been giving out 200 to 300 pardons. President Biden is now giving out 8,027 pardons. And what it's about is a pardon power extends to all federal criminal offenses, except in the case of impeachment, and entails various forms of clemency, including commuting or postponing a sentence, remitting a fine or restitution, delaying the imposition of punishment, and providing amnesty to an entire group or class of individuals. So the pardon is a big deal. And President Obama, for example, did 1,715 commutation, but 212 pardons. And so it's a controversial subject, but I believe the people in the DC just listen. I thought it was a good thing because 6,500 of those folks that received the pardons were people who were convicted of marijuana type offenses. And so it made sense to do that because there is a conflict between state and federal laws. In many states now, marijuana is legalized. And of course, the federal government is behind the curve on this issue. So therefore, I think that is a good starting point. So President Biden, good job. Attorney Banks, I know that before the show, you had some concerns, and you said that there was a controversial pardon there in Illinois. Tell us about that.
Nate?
Yes, and thank you, Attorney Lee. And just 2 days ago, President Biden issued presidential pardons to 39 Americans convicted of nonviolent crimes, and he commuted the sentences of nearly 1,500 others. And these were largely individuals that were engaged in non-violent crimes. Many of them had served a majority of their sentence, and some had been serving time at home as a result of COVID-19. But in this one case that he commuted the sentence of Rita Crunwell, that commutation has resulted in a lot of outrage in the state of Illinois, and particularly in Dixon, Illinois, which is a very small Illinois town. Miss Crunwell had been convicted of the largest municipal embezzlement in U.S. history. She had, in her role as the former controller of Dixon, she had stolen over $53 million from the city. And so there's been just a lot of outrage regarding the commutation of her sentence this week. She had been convicted of fraud and embezzlement in 2013, and she had been sentenced to almost 20 years, and she was not scheduled to be released until 2029. Yet she was serving her She was currently serving her sentence at home as a result of being released to home confinement during the pandemic. So there's been a lot of outrage here in Illinois regarding her release this week.
Well, see, my concern is uh, so an embezzlement of 54 million. But my problem is this, counselor, why didn't they grant a pardon to Jesse Jackson Jr.? I mean, he served his sentence, got conscripted of his congressional seat. He was a rising star, maybe even would have been a presidential candidate. And he had a campaign finance violation. It
I think,
wasn't a substantial sum of money. And, he went to prison for it.
and I
Well,
think that you raise a great question, and all the conversations regarding pardons and clemency this week, and as the Biden administration ramps down, has led me to question what is the process and what are the factors that are taken into consideration in granting these pardons and clemency request.
well,
And
the
so who
lady,
knows? Maybe someone has filed a request to pardon Jesse Jackson, Jr., Attorney Lee.
well, if I may interrupt, I'm sorry. Cromwell, did she get a pardon or a commutation? Seemed like I heard you say a commutation, and isn't a commutation a reduction of the sentence, but it doesn't have the same effect on the individual as a pardon, which reinstates your constitutional rights and your other rights that you can do. You can own a gun, you can vote, you can do certain things, but the commutation is just a reduction of your sentence, right? So she just is no longer on home confinement, but she still have other things that affect her life, right? Am I wrong?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
That's a great distinction that you're making, Attorney
okay.
Grimes, when you're comparing Jesse Jackson Jr. to Miss Cromwell.
So I have to get to what is her age, what's her health. She's been in custody since 2013. That's 11 years. This is a white collar crime, no injury to anyone. I don't know all of the elements or the categories that affect her reduction of sentence. COVID, thank God, I was reading that back in a few years ago during the height of COVID, 1 out of 5 federal prisoners had COVID. And so it was damn near epidemic proportion in some of the prisons out here in California, federal prisons. It was rampant, like half of the population had COVID. So 1 out of 5 is a pretty heavy number of people that were exposed to COVID in the federal system.
That
So I
is
don't,
so true. A commutation means that the president she's being released um, from the remaining part
right,
of her term, right?
right.
So
Oh,
she was scheduled to be imprisoned until 2029. She's gotten what, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5 years shaved off of her prison term.
right. So, this criminal justice system here in America, y'all, is got to be rehab. I mean, there are other countries, the maximum prison sentence you get, even for murder, is 20, I think it's 23 years, if I'm not, like in Norway, if I remember my reading some years ago when I was looking at this closer. But there's a lot of countries that is, I don't think are as draconian, for lack of a better word, as the United States in locking people up. We got the highest prison population of any country in the world. You follow me? And we can't just keep putting people in prison. It ain't helping nobody. It protects society from some type of people, but it's not the remedy to crime. It's not the solution. We have another guest on here I haven't been introduced to, Mr. Cox. Good afternoon, Mr. Cox. Good evening. Good morning.
Good morning to you, sir, as well. My question is not really a question, it's just a comment. So we've got all these commutations, or as you say, releasing people from prison. I heard some gentleman on one of the networks this week indicate that this was a bad move, period, to allow these people to have these pardons prior to the transition of the presidential power, so-called what's going to happen on inaugural day, because it's going to set a pattern that we haven't had in the past before. So I guess while you're in office, you can excuse as many of your friends as possible. And I think the issue was that President Biden, in doing what he's doing, has set a new standard. And prior to the start of the show, I understand Attorney Lee was reading off how several other presidents have released or granted pardons to so many other people, but it was never an issue. But now it's an issue. So I'm just curious as to how you legal minds think about, is this a good thing to happen for the country right now, with everything else that's going on, to grant pardons to people who have committed crimes? And if so, is it going to be selective? I mean, are we going to get down to as you said, Attorney Grimes, how many people have been in prison and now they're going to be released for, a little bit of nothing? I'm just curious.
I don't know if it's for a little bit of nothing. You got some people that, I remember back in the day, I had a client to go to prison for 3 years for an ounce of marijuana. This is years ago now. This is 30 years or more ago. But then that same ounce of marijuana today would get you a diversion or an infraction, and you go home right away. You turn around and go home. So we haven't been right necessarily in our handing out time. I don't think it needs to be revisited. It is not an absolute just because you got 10 years or 5 years that was correct. God doesn't look down and say that's the almighty word and everybody gets 10 years or 5 years. Man made these rules. I guess I have a question about the fairness of a lot of sentences that have taken place, like especially with African-American men. And there needs to be an adjustment of some sentences where you got a young man in prison for possession of marijuana or any other drug, has not hurt anybody. They have revisited some of these sentences and have decided it's too much time being given to some. So we need to make an adjustment. Biden is making an adjustment. We don't know what Brother Trump is going to do with his power. So
well, he's indicated that everyone involved in January 6th, what debacle that was happening, he's going to release all those people. I'm waiting to see if that really happens, because if it does,
then he's going to go out and arrest the people who investigated that situation. That's not a crime. They were just doing their job. So, man.
Yeah, I know. That's I'm as a layperson, I'm somewhat concerned about what's going to happen, and maybe nothing to happen at all. Maybe he'll just stick to as one very intelligent attorney told me once. He said, "Mr. Trump likes millionaires," and so if he sticks with those millionaires and leaves us alone, I guess we'll be okay.
I haven't heard of any violent felons being released, the sentence being commutated, or they being pardoned. It is mostly non-violent crimes that are being addressed that were over sentenced in the first place.
Okay.
I know Attorney Banks were concerned that people in Illinois were outraged about the financial fraud, and but it was commutation of sentence. So he took 4 or 5 years off their sentence after 20 years. So she was 71, by the way. But that January 6th, I know that he has said that. The one thing about the January 6th of people who try to overthrow the federal government, they were equal opportunity show of force in abuse to individuals. They were set out to go and kill the vice president of the United States.
And they beat officers.
They beat up officers. I mean, it was a crazy time, man. I was thinking about that, so that was a strange situation in American history.
Mhm.
And when I thought about it, I said, okay, the people that they were going to kill weren't just Democrats, but Republicans. The vice president was on the hit list. A lot of people maybe forgot about that, but the mantra was hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence.
And despite those threats, the incoming administration will have to look at each and every one of those cases individually. Those cases will not be able to be reviewed, all together, just like the pardon process that we're talking about now, right? Each of those cases have to be viewed on their own merit. And I would seriously doubt that those who were engaged in assaulting and battering police officers should have their sentences commuted, or they should be pardoned. And there should be public outrage regarding this situation with respect to the insurrection.
Yeah, Brother Cox, I'm sorry. In
Mm.
my feeling, we're in some different times. We're in some, we are, this is not America as America was that we grew up in, not to say it was right then, but
Mm.
we're being faced with some difficult situations and decisions to be made with this change of administration here.
I
So
agree. I agree. And
standing on the past principles or the past policies and practices, it may be time to move from those to deal with this new situation.
and I agree with
Absolutely.
you. I agree with all of you. I think as a, as I look at my granddaughter and my nieces and my nephews who are all of in that young generation and have no idea what's going on. It's not the same world that I grew up in, or nor you. I mean, I'm 72 years old, and I got to tell you, uh, 50 years has made a lot of difference compared to what these kids have got to deal with now. Democracy in the United States of America is certainly got to be
On
re-examined.
Is being attacked.
It's
Yeah.
fragile.
Well, speaking of that, got great news. That is, we saw in the last couple of weeks um, a promise kept by Joe Biden. He said that he would bring diversity to the federal judiciary and that he would make sure that there'll be a pro rata share of African American women appointed. Thus far, as of this week, President Biden has appointed 40 Black women to federal appointments. Now, let me go through the number. In the history of our country, dating back to the 1960s, Lyndon Johnson appointed one Black woman. Richard Nixon, 0. Gerald Ford, 0. Jimmy Carter, Democrat, 7. Ronald Reagan, Republican, 1. George Herbert Walker Bush, 2. Bill Clinton, 15. George W. Bush, 8. So George W. Bush appointed more Black women to federal judiciary than any other Republican in American history. Then Barack Obama, 26. Donald Trump, 2. Donald Trump, 2. Joe Biden, 40. So Joe Biden has delivered. African American women led the process for him to get elected, and he's delivered with these appointments. So thank Joe Biden. He's done a good job.
That was
And
one promise delivered. I read that report this week as well, Nathaniel. So thank you for laying those statistics out. Also, might I add that the Biden administration is the most diverse in the history of this country as well. I wanted to go back a minute to pardons because there's
Okay,
a
go
lot
ahead.
to, of course, unpack there. And so I'm hoping that the administration is evaluating individuals who are now on death row. And we know that there's a disproportionate impact on Black men and minorities with respect to those that are uh, executed in this country. And I'm hoping that pardons are being considered under the guidance and direction of the Equal Justice Initiative, which is led by Brian Steverson, as well as the Innocence Project. In those cases where now, Attorney Grimes and Lee, DNA evidence is is demonstrating that individuals that have been convicted of these crimes, um, that the DNA evidence demonstrates that these individuals, some of which are on death row, did not commit those crimes. So I hope that applications are being considered as we speak for those that are on death row, as well as those that have been convicted of crimes that now current technology and DNA evidence have shown that they did not commit those crimes.
Agree.
I also hope that Marilyn Mosby's request, an application for a pardon, is accepted as well. There are several groups that are advocating that she be pardoned. As you know, she is the former um, state's attorney from Baltimore, Maryland, that was convicted of using her own money in her 401k account, to buy a home. She's the only person that we know in American history that has been convicted of that. And so she's currently on home arrest. She did not get any prison time, but she's currently confined to her home, I believe, for at least a year. And so there's been an application to pardon former state's attorney Marilyn Mosby as well.
Well, it's interesting you said that because it made big headlines. She's gotten thousands of people, but for a reason, President Biden left her out. And that, to me, was an easy decision in terms of the use of the presidential pardon. Not
Well,
only was it not a victimless crime, but when a person take money out of their retirement account, they get subject to significant penalties. And
well,
this money that she earned. So she's actually spending her own money and she's going to prison for it. I just thought it was a bad prosecution, of all the crimes. But I thought it had a lot to do with the fact that she was trying to hold police officers accountable for misconduct. Uh, I didn't like the fact that I watched part of that case. They killed this young man in the back of a police van, and at a minimum, it was reckless misconduct. And they should have been convicted of something, and for them to be found not guilty, you respect the decision. But it seemed like me that they did have some exposure based on the evidence in the case.
And that was
And
Ferry Gray, who was killed by a
you
police
being polite,
officer.
you being polite, Nate, because it wasn't negligent misconduct, it was intentional misconduct. They put him back there to rough him up with inside the vehicle, rolling him around like you shake something you're shaking a martini or something, however you make martinis, but you expect the person to be injured and possibly killed in a situation like that. It's not negligent. I don't give them that benefit of the doubt. But as I understood and read today, the president has not finished with review of the list
Right.
for people that he's going to pardon or commute their sentences. So she may be on the list, just haven't gotten to her. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just saying he's not finished.
Okay. Hey, as a layperson, Attorney Lee, you had made the comment that he had that President Biden had appointed more Black women to the bench, or giving them higher positions. Do these appointments have to go before the Senate for approval, or what?
Yes,
They do?
that's the bad part about it.
Yeah,
It's
that's what
been
I'm
a
curious.
struggle, and a really tough struggle, because you have to get the Senate and you got to get 51 votes, right?
Mm,
And
mhm.
so, and then what has been one of the arbitrage, even when we had control of the House or the Senate, it wasn't that we had 51 votes, we had 49 votes and two maybes. Cinnamon and Manchin never was on board 100% with the administrative effort for appointments, legislation, and they both, of course, left the Democratic Party, and they're still Democrats' position, but they did not see fit to try to wholly support the Democrats' agenda. Like Joe Manchin, he's West Virginia, probably one of, if not the poorest state in the country. It's got to be first or second in terms of poverty.
Yeah.
And let a guy from a poor state, one of the smallest states in the country, have that much power is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
The fact that somehow uh, he was considered running for president, I thought was just a joke. It just told me that he had an incredible ego about himself. You know, incredible ego. So I say good riddance to that guy, in the sense that he could have helped get some additional legislation passed, and they did not want to do anything about the filibuster, which hurt some significant legislation. The police misconduct, the Florida Act, voters legislation, campaign finance. None of this stuff could get done because we did not have uh, two senators who did not give us the majority, quite frankly.
Now,
Okay, so go ahead. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, Red.
No, I was going to say, so going into the new Senate makeup, 53 Republicans, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're going to have 53 out of the 100. Is it possible that those 53 would vote in a block and block all 20 of the appointments that President Biden has recommended?
You mean Trump?
Well, you said
President
Biden's
Biden, the
appointed,
current ones. I
he
wanted to
appointed these.
comment here on
Yeah,
this discussion that
go.
the a deal has been reached with President Biden, um, that they won't hold a vote. The Senate won't hold a vote on four of Biden's appellate court nominees as part of a deal where Republicans will allow for speedier consideration of the other judicial nominations and bring him, President Biden, within striking distance of a total of 234 judicial confirmations. Um, he currently has 221 confirmed judicial appointments. And Nathaniel, when I was reading that report that you shared, when it talks about the number of judges that have been appointed, African American female judges, right? I just assumed that they had been confirmed.
Okay.
Well, as of yesterday, I was looking at the updated number.
Mm-hmm.
The Senate is now confirmed, as of yesterday, they got up to 233 total Article 3 judges nominated by President Biden. And of course, in that group, we had Social Justice for U.S. Supreme Court, and then we had 45 judges to the Court of Appeals. and 185 of those are trial judges at the district court level. So they're still making progress. And everybody got to remember that time runs out, I think, next Friday? They shut it down until next year. And then when they come back, we have a Republican-controlled Senate. So we won't get any judges confirmed. There will be no legislation passed between January 1st and January 21st by the House or the Senate, none. So, you know, it's the ultimate in being a lame duck president. You really are a lame duck president. Once the clock turns, you lose the House and the Senate. If we had won the House and the Senate, he could still get things done in January, but that's not the case. Now there's nothing going to get done,
Excellent
unfortunately.
point. And 4 of those judges that weren't included in that deal, reached with the Senate, have decided that they're not going to retire.
They're not what?
Well, 4 of the slots that were vacant and nominations could be made, 2 of those judges have decided that they're not going to retire as a result of the election, that they're going to remain in their seat.
They're not going to give Trump those slots.
Exactly. So we'll see what happens.
I wish them good health so they can hold on to that.
Attorney Grimes, a quick question. You said things have changed. Just what do you think about?
Don't spread that across the board. Things have changed.
No, I'm not spreading about. This is you and I. This is you and I talking. What I'm looking at here is before you guys move on to another topic. Mitch McConnell has chosen his predecessor, or his successor, I should say, this gentleman named Thune. I think that's his last name. Are you familiar with him, or do you have any idea where McConnell had that Senate under control? You think this new Senate leader for the Republicans under Thune is going to be as powerful, or with the blessing of McConnell, is he going to be able to run that Senate?
I'm going to defer to Miss Banks because she keep up with them people. I just am too old and don't have the time to follow them like she does. So I think she would be a better person to answer that, her or Nate.
I would be, but not tonight. Not today.
No, brother, I don't.
Because I have to take a look. I didn't know that he had already anointed his successor, Fred. And so I have to take a quick look at.
Yeah, they said that the gentleman out of Texas, Cronin or whatever his name, he was the favorite lead horse, so to speak. And then this guy named Thune came out of nowhere, and he is now going to be the Senate leader.
Well, here's how it works. It's a very simple process. Here's how it works. Here's how they gather power. It's based on their ability to attract major donors and generate money for their senatorial campaign. These senators in their senatorial campaign, they may pick up $5, $10, $15 million from the senatorial campaign committee. And so they become loyal to that person because it helped them get elected. The best example of that is Tuberville out of Alabama, one of the dumbest senators in American history, right? He was a football coach. And Tuberville will tell you the only reason he's a U.S. senator is because Donald Trump endorsed him. He did no debate. He had no policy, no position, and he got elected U.S. senator by a big margin. And all you do is that Donald Trump endorsed me. That was his badge of honor. He did nothing else. His speech is, President Trump endorsed me. That's it.
That's it.
He was too dumb to come up with any policy that made sense. And
Alabama? Okay.
Yeah, but he was, it's an embarrassment. He did not even know the 3 branches of government. When he was talking about the branches of government, you know.
Was he a winning football coach?
House and Senate. I mean, he didn't know about the executive branch, the judicial branch, and congressional. You know, he didn't know the 3 branches. It was shocking, and they elected U.S. senator. So the point I'm making is money drives loyalty, particularly at that level. Okay. If you want to meet with a U.S. senator, you got to pay the piper. That's kind of the way it works.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
But
Another interesting Illinois consideration is the fact that Senator Dick Durbin has announced that he will be announcing whether he's going to run sometime early this year, next year. And so the question will become, if he vacates his seat, who's in line to succeed him? I would think, Attorney Lee and Grimes, that potentially R.J. Pritzker may decide to run for president in what, 2028?
Of the United States?
Potentially. He's on a list, I'm sure, of individuals that are considering running for president. And then the question becomes, if the governorship is vacated, who might fill that role? We currently have the first African-American female lieutenant governor of the state of Illinois, Juliana Stratton. So once Senator Durbin decides what he's going to do, that's going to create a lot of interesting politics, Nathaniel, here in Illinois.
well, he graduated from high school in 1962. So what? He's about 80 years old now.
Yeah.
And so when he finished his term, it'd be at least 82, 83. And so that makes sense. But here's my take on this. There is a very strong political machine there in Chicago. If somebody, particularly some minority, get enough steam, they could win that Senate seat in Illinois, because the Democrats are in that Cook County area. You know, you have down the state, council, I've been there in Southern Illinois, and I remember going to federal court, right? We had a really bad collision in Illinois, and I smartly filed suit there, and right there on the East St. Louis or whatever the city is, the federal court there, which is a lot more racially diverse. But we had to go to a settlement conference in Southern Illinois with the magistrate, and I was down Highway 57. And so my clients, for this mediation that was scheduled for a whole day, they got there the day before. I think the mediation may have been on Monday. They drove up on Sunday. When they drove up there and they parked at the hotel, they were walking to the store, and the guy came by with the Confederate flag and started yelling the N-word at these folks. Now, this wasn't 1960. This was like in 2019 or something. And so that gave me a good idea about Southern Illinois. I was just surprised that you had that many people openly being members of the KKK. You know, I know we had an origin here in Indiana, but I was surprised by the large number of people who were of that ideology. And so the point I'm making is those people are Republicans. And so I'm thinking that you can get a good candidate who can raise about 20 million right away. And I think that they could carry the day there in Illinois. It'd been nice if the president pardoned Jesse Jackson Jr. I thought he was a rising star at one time.
He really did have a great deal of potential. And as you know, we have Illinois Representative Jonathan Jackson. He's a member of Congress as well, currently. Pretty low key, very low key.
Yeah, I've never met him.
But very, very effective in his role and his advocacy for issues impacting our communities.
Well, Durbin term ends in 2027. So in 20, 28. So what's that? It's 2025. So what, he's got 2 more years? Is that doing the math right on that? Yeah, 2 more years to serve. And hopefully they get together and support a good candidate. And because he has a lot of power, and
Absolutely.
he took
Incredible.
control of the Judiciary Committee, and and see, I thought that it did not produce the number of African American judges in the federal system in Illinois that I thought they should have. And he kind of controlled the process. But there's one thing that I think is salient here, because finance is important in national politics. You know, a lot of people don't realize this. The people in the House and Senate, they make about $174,000 a year, right? And a lot of people may think that's a lot of money, but when you are elected official, the reason monetary is so important, you maintain 2 households. A cheap apartment in DC runs about $3,000 a month, you know, 2 bedrooms. So if you get an apartment in DC and you're paying your taxes, say you made $180,000 a year, well, about a third of that's going to go in state, local, and federal taxes. So you have about $10,000 a month. So if you pay for the apartment, $3,000 a month, food, events, all of a sudden you're spending about $8,000 a month in DC. But then you have a house in your state that you have to maintain. And so it's almost like you could run for those type of officers and be eligible for food stamp in your home state. And I don't think most people realize that their salary is misinterpreted because you have to maintain 2 residents. Now, why that's important? That's why historically that we've had a lot of African Americans unable to run for these offices. Now we're seeing more and more of that for the first time in history. You know, we're going to have 2 African American women in Senate, one from Delaware, one from Maryland, and also Cory Booker in New Jersey. And, you know, so the point I'm making is that we're making progress now, but it's difficult. You know, Fred, it's very difficult because of the financial hardship that it imposed on the candidate and their families.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the next issue has to do with a quick review of the things that the Biden administration have done. But, you know, in the legal community, I could attest to the fact that for the first time in American history, we had 2 African-American U.S. attorneys here in Indiana. Before Biden, in the history of our state, we never had a Black person serve as U.S. attorney in the state of Indiana.
Okay.
That was historic. Now, come January 21st, what Trump did last time, he fired all the U.S. attorneys his first day in office. You know, so I'm thinking that we may see a similar episode. Whereas Biden, on the other hand, he didn't.
Now, when he
You know?
fires those attorneys, does he? How do you replace them? Does he make the decision to who he's going to replace them with?
Well, when the election occurs, before the election occurs, each candidate run for president have a transition team, right? And so in that transition team, they do appointments for like federal positions and things like that. So all these process, they started, once a person becomes the front runner, and then they get advancement and they set up a transition. So both campaigns had transition teams, right? So in that process, they identify candidates for all types of position. There's over like 8,000 or so. I don't know the exact number, but you can look at the Plum Book, and there's over 8,000 of these appointed positions, right? And so the ones that we focus on are the big names like Secretary of State, Health and Human Services, and things like that. But there's all sorts of appointments that they have to make. And so by January 21st, they usually have identified the 8,000 some odd people they want to appoint.
Okay.
And because of that, both Biden had a list, and so Trump had, and so did Kamala Harris. But the appointment process is kind of bizarre. What Trump is doing, he's been nominating some people, it looked like, that are totally unfit for the position that they've been nominated for. And I'm not sure how this is going to play out in American democracy.
Are you
I'm
referring
not
to
sure.
that the gentleman that he's appointed to be the new FBI director? Is that one of the appointments?
Not just that one. I mean, any of them. It's not just the FBI guy. I mean, go down the list of people. Peter Navarro, who just got out of prison. I mean, he's appointed him. I mean, it would be daughter-in-law. He's appointed her to ambassador. So he's going down the list of people who are, some are specifically unfit and unqualified to hold those positions. But there's something that's critical, though, that most people don't realize. The Biden economy is going to hit full stride in 2025. And most people don't realize that massive infrastructural $1.9 trillion deal, that's going to go into next year. And so next year, our economy is going to be great. Even Trump won't be able to screw that up. So in other words, because of all the investment, you can't go anywhere, for example, in our state and not see construction, right? Highway,
True.
bridges, overpass, right? Well, that goes into 2025. And so next year, we should have a very good year. And Trump will take credit for it, but this Biden economy, just like Obama, will go for all next year. Now, what we'll see is in the third year. The third year in which you should see some difference. So his policy, because when the president takes office, he's saying, what I want to do is go out and round everybody up and deport them out of the country, right? Well, that can't work because I don't know how they're doing in your cities, like Attorney Banks or Grimes, but here, if you want to get the roof done, there are people from South America or Mexico.
That is true.
All the buildings downtown Indianapolis are done from people from Mexico. America's not doing those jobs. And so now I'm thinking, who's going to clean the toilets and stuff of the public buildings?
Well, my understanding is they're rehabbing and fixing up some of the federal facilities that are dilapidated to house the immigrants that he's planning on sending back. So he's serious about sending people back to their country of origin.
He is serious about that. And I believe that city mayors like Mayor Adams in New York, who sat down with the immigration czar, what's his name, Tom Homan.
Czar.
And Mayor Adams agrees that they want criminals out of the country as well. And so I think that necessarily has to be the initial focus. All of this, rhetoric around, mass deportation, I don't see it happening initially, or maybe even ever, because, first of all, there's no infrastructure to make it happen. He's talking about using the military to achieve this goal. And I think that if you look at it realistically, I think all mayors would want to deport convicted criminals, right? And I don't know what number I've seen. I think I might have seen something. I don't know if they've been convicted, but criminals, maybe a number of 11,000, something like that.
Attorney Banks, I read an article that in your state of Illinois, that some of the you mentioned criminals, but some of the gangs that have been around for a long time, particularly the African American or Black gangs, are saying that there've been quite a few immigrants that have come into the Illinois area and probably that state of New York as well. And they're hoping that those are the ones that they get deported because it seems like there's friction between the gangs, the Black gangs and now the Hispanic gangs or whatever they are.
That's
I don't know if you.
unfortunate, but again, you're confirming, Fred, the focus on criminals
Mhm.
is a valid focus.
Okay.
Well,
My
let's
perspective, right?
let me check the record straight, audience. There's something you need to know. This so-called immigrant criminals is a myth. It's a false narrative. About 70% of all crimes in the United States were committed by whites, 26% by African American. Only 14% was committed by Latinos. So if you look at actual crime statistics, so are you going to start deport the 70% of the people who commit a crime in the United States?
Well,
Well,
no,
see, the
because
point I'm making is that we make these bigoted statements without looking at the actual statistics. And so they dramatize when there is a Hispanic guy killed a lady, like, for example, in the University of Georgia. It became a big deal. Well, what about the white guy that shot 525 people in Las Vegas? So crime statistics is misleading. And don't think that that's what they're saying is true. It's not true. So it's not like these people that are immigrants or the criminals that they're saying they are, their crime statistic is lower than any group. And don't forget that.
That's an
Okay.
excellent point, Attorney Lee. And the term criminal non-citizens refers to people that have been convicted of one or more crimes, whether in the United States or abroad.
Hmm.
And I'm looking at a number here to your point. This is a 2016 Department of Homeland Security report that said more than 13,000 immigrants convicted of homicide are living outside immigration detention in the United States, according to ICE.
Okay, closing comments. As we close the show out, any closing comment, Milton?
Well, I like to see President Biden accomplish his goal and implement as much of his objective as possible as far as the judges, the clemency or the pardons and the commutations before we start dealing with this next administration. I just don't trust this next administration. So I hope President Biden is able to do a lot of things in his next, how many days?
Well, it's 21 in January, and how many more days we got this month? Well, another 15 days this month. So
15,
about 36, 37 days.
but the ones in January are not counting, are they?
No, well, he could still commute or issue pardons, but he won't be able to get any legislations done.
All right, okay.
Attorney Banks?
I would just like to wish everyone a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas, and to enjoy your family and friends during the holiday season as we prepare for 2020-25. And from my perspective, we have to address each issue that presents itself. We can't relent. We have to continue to advocate on behalf of our communities. We have to run for office. We have to vote in every election. And we have municipal elections coming up in Illinois, and I'm sure across the country, and those elections are different dates. So you want to make sure that you know what dates the upcoming elections are, and you need to know the candidates, and you need to know how they stand on issues that directly impact your communities.
Well, thank you, everyone, and have a blessed day. And remember, be safe. If you're going to travel over the holiday, take your time. Thank you, everyone.